She was the first one off the train. Not because she was eager. She had stopped being eager somewhere around the Kansas border, around the time she had run out of the particular kind of optimism that gets you through the early miles, and before you find the other kind, the harder kind, that gets you through the rest. She was first off the train because she had been sitting nearest the door, and because waiting had never been something she was built for, and because whatever was going to happen on the platform in Grover's Bend, Montana, was going to happen whether she stood in the train car dreading it for another 5 minutes or not. She had traveled 4 days and 1,100 miles from Cincinnati, Ohio, with a carpet bag and a tin of shortbread her landlady had pressed into her hands at the station, and the photograph of a man named Douglas Alton, who had written her 9 letters over the course of 4 months, and had described himself in those letters as a cattle rancher of steady income and steady character. She stepped onto the platform of Grover's Bend and looked for Douglas Alton. She did not find him. What she found instead was a platform with perhaps 20 people on it, none of whom were looking at her with the expression of a man meeting a woman he had corresponded with for 4 months and intended to marry. She also found, stepping off the train behind her, 3 other women with carpet bags and the specific expression she recognized from her own face in the window glass. The expression of someone who has committed fully to a thing and is now standing in the moment of finding out whether the thing was real. They looked at each other the way women looked at each other when they recognized something. If you've ever stepped towards something that required everything you had and found out the ground wasn't where you thought it was, stay with me to the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this one travels. The second woman's name was Clara Hoyt. She was 32, from Philadelphia, and she had the compact, deliberate quality of someone who had been managing things since before she should have had to. Her husband had died 4 years prior of a factory accident, and the 4 years since had been the education of a woman learning what it meant to be alone in a city that had no particular interest in that fact. She had answered the advertisement of a man named Samuel Birch, cattle buyer, Grover's Bend, Montana, who had written 3 letters that were businesslike to the point of seeming cold, which she had taken as a feature rather than a defect, because she had had enough warmth that didn't deliver. She stepped onto the platform and looked for Samuel Birch. She did not find him either. The third woman was Mercy Flood, 24 years old, from a small town in Tennessee that she had left in the spring with a speed that suggested the leaving was as much the point as the arriving. She was darker complexioned than the other 2, with the kind of stillness that was not shyness but was the careful management of a woman who had learned that rooms assessed her before she opened her mouth, and who had developed, in response to this, a composure that could be mistaken for distance and was in fact armor that she wore efficiently and without complaint. She had corresponded with a man named George Fail, who had written her 4 letters beginning with one that had said, among other things, that he did not care about where she was from or what anyone thought about who she was, that he needed capable hands and honest dealing, and would provide the same. She had believed him because the letter had felt true, and she had learned to trust her assessment of letters, which had been all she had to go on. She stepped onto the platform and looked for George Fail. The 4th woman off the train was the youngest and the least practiced at concealing what she felt, which meant that when she stepped onto the platform and found it absent of anyone looking for her, her face said so before she could arrange it differently. Her name was Prue Dalloway. She was 21, from a farm in Indiana, and she had answered an advertisement because the farm was her father's, and her father had 8 other children, and a new wife, who considered Prue an inconvenience in the specific way that stepmothers in crowded farmhouses considered older daughters from the first marriage. She was not bitter about this. She was practical about it, which was better. The man she had written to was named Henry Cole, homesteader, and he had written her 2 letters that were not eloquent but were earnest, and earnest had seemed like enough. She stepped onto the platform. No Henry Cole. She stood beside the other 3 women, and the 4 of them stood on the platform of Grover's Bend, Montana, in the afternoon of an April day in 1884, with their carpet bags and their photographs and their correspondence, and looked at a town that was not looking back at them the way they had been told it would. The town of Grover's Bend was not an unkind place. It was also not a watching place, which meant that the 4 women could stand on the platform for a full 10 minutes without anyone taking particular notice, which was a mercy of a kind. Edith was the first to speak. "Who were you going to?" She asked it the way you asked, when you already suspected the answer was not going to be useful. "Douglas Alton," she said, by way of example. "Samuel Birch," Clara said. "George Fail," Mercy said. "Henry Cole," Prue said. A silence in which they all arrived at the same conclusion at the same time. "Different men," Clara said. "Yes," Edith said. "Who are none of them here?" Mercy said. "No." Edith agreed. Prue was looking at the platform end, as if Henry Cole might still materialize from the direction of town. He did not. "All right," Edith said. She said it the way she said everything that needed addressing, which was as a fact that required a response, rather than an emotion that required expression. "We need to find out what's happened, whether they're late or whether they're not coming," Clara said. "We don't know that yet," Edith said, although her face said that she was already calculating the probability. "The station agent," Mercy said. They went to the station agent. The station agent was a man named Cobb, who had the look of someone who had delivered unpleasant information, often enough to have developed a method for it. He looked at the four women, and at their bags, and at the photographs they produced for his inspection, and his method appeared to involve a moment of looking at the ceiling before looking back. "Alton?" he said. "Yes," Edith said. "Sold his cattle operation in February. Moved to Oregon." Edith's face did the thing her face did when she received information she was processing, a brief controlled stillness, then on. "Birch?" Clara said. "Birch got married," Cobb said. "To the miller's daughter in January, local girl." He said this with the particular discomfort of someone saying something that was true and clearly insufficient. "Fale," Mercy said. "Fale's got a drinking situation," Cobb said. He said it carefully, the way people said things about drinking situations in mixed company. "His brother made him go to his family in Billings. That was March." Prue had not asked about Henry Cole. Cobb looked at her. "Cole," she said. "Cole's still here," Cobb said. Prue's face started to rearrange. "He's 17 years old," Cobb said. Prue's face stopped rearranging. "His mother wrote the letters," Cobb said. "She thought if she found him a wife, it would settle him down. She got the age wrong in the advertisement by—" He stopped. "By about 6 years." 4 women stood in the station of Grover's Bend, Montana, and absorbed the full accounting of what they had traveled 1,100 miles toward. Clara, who had the administrative mind of someone who had been solving problems before others named them, said, "Is there a boarding house?" "Mrs. Farrow's," Cobb said. 2 streets east." "Thank you," Clara said, which was more grace than the situation required, but was in her nature. They picked up their bags. They walked to Mrs. Farrow's. They took 2 rooms between the 4 of them, which was a calculation of economy rather than preference. Edith and Clara took 1 room, Mercy and Prue the other. They all met in the small parlor that Mrs. Farrow kept at the front of the house, which had 4 chairs and a window that looked onto the main street of Grover's Bend and the ordinary traffic of a Thursday afternoon. Mrs. Farrow was 70 and had seen most things and reacted to few of them. She brought tea without being asked and set it on the parlor table and looked at the 4 women with the assessment of someone who had been running a boarding house long enough to read a situation accurately. "Mail order," she said. "Yes," Edith said. "What happened to the men?" she said. They told her. She listened to each one with the even attention of a woman who had heard versions of this before, which she had, though usually 1 at a time, rather than 4 consecutively. "All right," she said, when they'd finished. "The rooms are $1 a week each. I'll give you the first week's credit, because I think the situation warrants it." "We don't need—" Edith started. "I know you don't need it," Mrs. Farrow said. I'm giving it because I choose to, not because I think you're in need of charity. There's a difference, and I'd appreciate you allowing me to know it. Edith looked at her. Thank you, Edith said. The town, Clara said. Will they know about us? Mrs. Farrow considered this. Cobb talks, she said. Not unkindly, he just talks. By tomorrow morning the story will be in circulation. Mercy looked at the window. What kind of story will it be? She said. Mrs. Farrow looked at her with the directness of an old woman who had no patience for soft answers. The kind that some people find entertaining, she said. And the kind that other people find worth doing something about. She stood. Those are the two kinds of people in any town. You'll find out which is which fairly quickly. She went to make supper. The story was in circulation by morning. Edith knew it because she had gone to the general store for thread. She had a habit of keeping her hands busy when she was thinking, and she was thinking a great deal, and the two women ahead of her at the counter had gone quiet in the particular way that meant she had been the subject of what they'd been saying before she opened the door. She bought the thread. She returned the looks she received with the level courtesy of a woman who had been on the receiving end of looks before and had no interest in making it easier by looking away. Clara went to the land office because Clara was the kind of person who, when stranded in an unfamiliar place, went to the land office to understand the landscape of the situation. She found a clerk who told her more than he perhaps meant to, including that Douglas Alton had indeed sold his operation and left in February, with considerable haste, the reason for which the clerk characterized as financial pressures, in the specific tone that meant something worse. Mercy stayed at the boarding house and helped Mrs. Farrow with the morning's work, which Mrs. Farrow did not ask for and did not refuse. They worked side by side for 2 hours, and Mrs. Farrow told her things about Grover's Bend in the way that working beside someone produced information, not a formal account, but the texture of a place, what it had been, and what it was. Prue went to the bakery and bought a biscuit with the last of the small money she had for incidentals, and sat on the front steps of Mrs. Farrow's boarding house and ate it, and watched the main street, and tried to work out what she was going to do, which she had not yet worked out by the time she finished the biscuit. They reconvened at noon. Douglas Alton was in debt, Clara said. The cattle operation wasn't sound. He was leaving regardless of any correspondence. So the advertisement was, Prue said. A man managing his exit, Clara said. Perhaps hoping a wife's resources might delay it. The four of them sat with this. What are we going to do? Prue said. Find work, Edith said. Or a way home, those are the options. My way home doesn't exist anymore, Mercy said, not with self-pity, just with accuracy. Mine either, really, Prue said. Clara and Edith looked at each other with the look of women who had more to go back to and were calculating whether going back was what they wanted. Then we find work, Edith said. The work was found and not found in the way of small towns, which was to say, there was always something and never quite enough of it. The hotel needed laundry help. The bakery needed morning work 3 days a week. A woman on the South Road needed her house managed through a confinement that was 2 months away. Between them, they had enough to keep the rooms at Mrs. Farrow's through the month, with care. They had been in Grover's Bend for 4 days when the cowboy appeared. He appeared the way things in small towns appeared, which was through someone mentioning him to someone else who mentioned him to Mrs. Farrow, who told Edith at breakfast on the 4th morning in the particular indirect way Mrs. Farrow communicated things she thought were important but wasn't going to push. There's a man named Asa Pell, Mrs. Farrow said, pouring coffee. He runs the Pell Creek Ranch, 7 miles north. He came in yesterday and heard about your situation. Edith held her coffee. And, she said. And he went to Cobb and asked which boarding house you were at. Edith looked at her. He asked Cobb. He did. Did Cobb tell him? I'm telling you this, Mrs. Farrow said. Which suggests that Cobb came and told me, rather than sending the man directly to you. Why? Mrs. Farrow sat down across from her, with the deliberation of an old woman who was going to say something she'd thought through. Because Cobb wanted someone to tell you first so you could decide whether you wanted him told where you were. Edith looked at the table. What is Asa Pell? She said. What kind of man? Mrs. Farrow looked at her. The kind, she said, that Cobb protected your location for. They all came down for breakfast that morning. Edith told them about Asa Pell while the coffee was hot and the morning was still early enough to have an honest conversation before the day required performances. Clara listened with the administrative attention she brought to everything. Mercy listened with the still quality that was her particular mode of receiving information. Prue listened with her hands around her cup. What does he want? Clara said. We don't know yet, Edith said. Are we going to find out? Mercy said. I think we should, Edith said. But I think we should find out together. They looked at each other. He asked where we were. Prue said. Not where one of us was. Yes, Edith said. I noticed that. What does that mean? Prue said. It means, Clara said, that he knows there are 4 of us. A silence in which this information sat and was considered. All right, Mercy said. Let him come. He came at 10 in the morning on the 4th day, which was long enough after Mrs. Farrow had told Edith that the timing felt like a deliberate choice rather than urgency, which told them something. Mrs. Farrow opened it and brought him to the parlor, where the 4 of them were sitting in the 4 chairs around the window, arranged not by plan, but by the natural way they had fallen into using space together, which was equally. He stood in the parlor doorway and looked at them. She would think about this later. All of them would think about it later. Not what any of them had imagined. Not that they had imagined. But there was a gap between what you expected from a man who had sought out 4 stranded women and what was standing in Mrs. Farrow's parlor. He was perhaps 40, not tall, but solid in the way of someone whose body was the result of work rather than intention. Dark coat, clean, which told her he had thought about this visit. A hat he held in his hands, which told her he knew where he was. A face that was not remarkable in any of its features, but had a quality she identified after a moment as this. It was the face of someone who said what they meant and expected the same in return, and had arranged their entire expression around this fact. He looked at the 4 of them, and he looked at each one in the way of someone seeing rather than assessing. Not the evaluating look, the inventorying look, the look she had been receiving from men since she'd stepped off the train. Just seeing. I'm Asa Pell, he said. We know, Edith said. Sit down, Mr. Pell. He sat in the 5th chair that Mrs. Farrow had placed, which told them she had known he was going to be asked to sit. You know why I'm here, he said. We know that you heard about our situation and asked where we were, Clara said. Beyond that, we know nothing. He nodded. I want to tell you something, he said. And I want to say it plainly, because I don't know another way to say things, and plain is more respectful than decorated. Go ahead, Edith said. He looked at all 4 of them, the deliberate look of a man who was not going to address one of them and let the others wonder. I have a ranch 7 miles north, he said. It's a working operation, cattle, primarily. I have 2 ranch hands, brothers, Ned and Seb, who are good workers. I have a house that has been running without the domestic management it needs for 3 years. I have accounts that are a problem I can solve by myself, but not well. I have a kitchen garden that is currently producing nothing, because I don't have the knowledge or the time for it. I have a root cellar that is not organized. I have a library of 12 books that none of us have read because we're too tired to read in the evenings. He paused. What I do not have, he said, is the situation you have. which is, 4 capable women who came 1,100 miles in good faith and were failed by people who made promises and didn't keep them. The parlor was very quiet. "I'm not here to offer anyone a marriage," he said. "I want to be clear about that because the context might suggest it and the context would be wrong. That's not what I'm offering, and not what I have the standing to offer 4 people I met 30 seconds ago." "Then what are you offering?" Clara said. "Work," he said. "Fair wages, room and board, a ranch that needs running and people who could run it, for as long as you want to stay, and no longer." He paused. "And a situation in which you are not 4 women stranded in a town that knows your story and will do with it what small towns do." He looked at them. "I know this is a strange offer," he said. "I know 4 women on a working ranch with 2 men is not a thing that Grover's Bend will understand without having opinions about it. I know you have no reason to trust a man you met 30 seconds ago." He paused. "But I drove 7 miles in this morning because I heard what happened to you, and it seemed like the wrong thing to do nothing about, and I've never been good at doing nothing about wrong things." He stopped. The 4 women looked at him. Edith looked at Clara. Clara looked at Mercy. Mercy looked at Prue. Prue looked at Asa Pell. "Give us an hour," Edith said. "Take the morning," he said. "I'll be at the hotel if you want to talk more." He stood. He put his hat on. He went. Mrs. Farrow appeared in the doorway with more coffee, which none of them had asked for, and set it on the table and went back to her kitchen. They talked for 2 hours. Not the hour Edith had said. 2, because the situation warranted it, and they were not women who made decisions they hadn't thought through. Edith began. "He said it plainly." "Yes," Clara said. "He wasn't performing it," Mercy said. "I've seen people perform plainness. That wasn't that." "He addressed all 4 of us equally," Edith said. "From the first moment." "That's deliberate," Clara said. "Or natural," Mercy said. "Which is better?" "He said he's not offering marriage," Prue said. "I believed him," Edith said. "Which is not a sentence I say often." They were quiet for a moment. "What are the risks?" Clara said, because Clara was the one who named the risks. "A man who says one thing and does another," Edith said. "Which has already happened to us," Mercy said. "We have some experience now in identifying it." "A situation that becomes uncomfortable when we can't leave," Clara said. "He said for as long as you want to stay, and no longer." Prue said. She had the good memory of a woman who paid attention. "Words," Clara said. "Yes," Edith said. "And we have to weigh those words against the only other information we have about him." "Which is?" Mercy said. "That he drove 7 miles in to help people he didn't know." "And asked Cobb where we were rather than coming directly," Prue said. "Which gave us the choice." A long silence. "Prue," Edith said. "What's your read?" Prue thought about it with the seriousness that was, they had all noticed, her characteristic approach to things she was taking seriously. "I think," she said, "that men who mean to do the wrong thing don't usually come with such specific information about what needs doing in the kitchen garden and the root cellar." Clara looked at her. "That's an unusual metric," Clara said. "It's accurate, though," Mercy said. Edith looked at all 3 of them. "I'll go see him this morning," she said. "I'll ask him the questions that need asking. You all come if you want to, or I'll report back." "We'll all come," Clara said. They all came. He was at the hotel, as he'd said, and they found him in the dining room with coffee, and the account book he'd apparently brought from the ranch to work on while he waited, which told them something about how he used time. He closed the account book when they came in. They sat down. "Questions?" Edith said. Yes, he said. How long since your wife died? Edith said. He looked at her with the expression of someone who had expected the questions to be less direct, and had decided immediately that the directness was fine. 3 years. He said. Her name was Frances. She died of a fever in the winter of '81. We had no children. The 2 ranch hands. Clara said. Ned and Seb, how long have they been with you? Ned for 6 years, Seb for 4. They're brothers from Missouri. They're good men. They'll mind their business. You're confident of that? Mercy said. He looked at her. I'll be clear. He said. I know what you're asking. You're asking whether my ranch is a situation where 4 women are going to be made uncomfortable by the men they're living near. Yes. Mercy said. That's what I'm asking. Ned is 52 and has been married for 30 years to a woman in Missouri who he sends money to every month. He said. Seb is 26 and is quietly in love with a girl in town who doesn't know it yet. Neither of them is going to be a problem. Mercy held his gaze for a moment. I believe you, she said. All right, he said. The wages, Clara said. What are you offering? $4 a month each, he said. Room and board, work divided by what each of you is suited to and willing to do. The division to be decided by you, not by me. By us? Edith said. By you, he said. I'll tell you what the ranch needs. How you organize the doing of it is your business. And if we don't agree with how something is being done, Edith said. On the ranch, not in the house, on the ranch side. He looked at her. Say it plainly, he said. If one of us has a better way to do something, and you're doing it wrong, she said. Are you the kind of man who hears that, or the kind who doesn't? He was quiet for a moment. I'm the kind who hears it, he said. I'm also the kind who'll tell you when I disagree, but I've never known anyone who improved a ranch by refusing to take in information. Clara said. We want a week. He looked at her. Come for a week, she said. All 4 of us, with our bags. At the end of the week we each decide separately whether to stay. If any of us says no, the ones who say no leave, and there's no pressure and no discussion. It's a clean decision. He looked at her for a moment. Yes, he said. That's reasonable. When? Edith said. Tomorrow morning, he said. If you want. They looked at each other. Tomorrow morning, Edith said. He came in the morning with a wagon big enough for 4 women and 4 bags, and whatever the 4 women had accumulated in 5 days at Mrs. Farrow's boarding house, which was not much, but was more than carpet bags, because Clara had bought flour at the general store, because she thought whoever was managing the ranch kitchen was going to need it. And Prue had found a seed packet at the dry goods store that she said was the right variety for the altitude, and Mercy had accepted from Mrs. Farrow a jar of something preserved that Mrs. Farrow pressed into her hands at the door without ceremony. Mrs. Farrow stood on her front step and looked at the 4 of them on the wagon. Right, she said. We will, Edith said. If it doesn't suit, come back, she said. The rooms will be here. Thank you, Mrs. Farrow, Clara said. Mrs. Farrow went inside. Asa Pell drove the wagon north. The ranch was what he'd said, and nothing embellished, which told her something about him. She, Edith, had been watching for the gap between the described thing and the actual thing, which was where men tended to reveal themselves. There was no gap. The house was solid and needed the domestic management he'd described. The kitchen garden was exactly the nothing he'd said it was. The root cellar was genuinely unorganized in the way of a space managed by men with a primary interest in cattle, who had dealt with the root cellar as an afterthought. The library had 12 books. Prue went to the library first and stood in front of the books for a long moment. Has anyone read these? She said. I read 2 of them the first winter, Asa said, before the work got to be what it is. You should read the others, she said. I should, he said. I haven't had the energy, she said. After the long days. Yes. We'll read them in the evenings, she said. When the work's done. He looked at her. All right, he said. Ned and Seb came in from the barn when the wagon arrived, and Asa introduced them without flourish. Ned, Seb, this is Edith, Clara, Mercy, and Prue. And Ned, who was 52, with the compact permanence of a man who had been doing one thing for 30 years and was good at it, said, "Welcome," and meant it, and went back to the barn. Seb, who was 26 and turned a particular color when anyone looked at him directly, said, "Ma'am," 4 times in quick succession, and also went back to the barn. He's worse with strangers than usual, Asa said. He's fine, Mercy said. He is fine, Asa agreed. They divided the work among themselves that first evening, at the kitchen table, with Asa present at Edith's request, because she thought it was better that he knew the arrangement than that he find it already made. Clara took the accounts. This was natural and inevitable, and she said so without modesty, which they had all come to understand in 5 days was her way. She was not a woman who performed humility she didn't feel, and she was very good with numbers, and it cost nothing to know both those things. Mercy took the kitchen. She had been cooking since she was 7, she said, in the way she said most things about herself, which was matter of fact and without seeking a reaction. She said she would need to know what the ranch ate and what it wouldn't, and what the budget was, and she would handle the rest. Edith took the garden and the root cellar and the household management, which was the largest category and the one she was most suited to, because she had been managing things since she was capable of understanding what management was. Prue looked at the list of what remained, which was the house itself, the cleaning and the ordering of it, and looked up at Asa, with the expression of someone identifying the thing she could do and the thing she actually wanted to do. The library, she said. And the children. There are no children, Asa said. There aren't now, she said. But there's a school in Grover's Bend. Yes, he said. Is there a position? The teacher they had left in January, he said. She looked at him. I taught a school in Indiana for 2 years, she said. Before? She stopped. I know how to do it. He looked at her steadily. That's between you and the school board, he said. But if you want the reference of a rancher who employs you, I'll write it. She looked at him. You'd do that, she said. Why wouldn't I? He said. She had no answer for that, which was itself an answer. I'll manage the house, she said, and pursue the school. All right, he said. He looked at the 4 of them, the arrangement they'd made, the division they'd drawn without him. Is there anything you need from me to start? He said. The account books, Clara said. The full pantry inventory, Mercy said. The garden tools and the cellar key, Edith said. A piece of paper and the school board chairman's name, Prue said. He got all of it. The first week was work. Not orientation, work, real work, the kind that told you by the end of the first day what you were dealing with, and by the end of the 3rd what you were capable of. Clara opened the account books and spent the first 2 days building a picture of the operation, which was the necessary preliminary to improving it. She found on the 3rd day what she had expected to find and had not said anything about until she was sure: a pattern of supply costs that was consistently higher than it needed to be. 2 vendors in particular, who had been overcharging for years in the specific gradual way that assumed no one was watching carefully. She showed Asa on the 4th day. He looked at the columns. He looked at them again. I've been paying this for 3 years, he said. Yes, she said. And it's significant, she said. Over 3 years it's significant. He was quiet for a moment. What do I do? He said. She had the answer ready because she had prepared it. She told him the alternative supplier, the price comparison, the projected savings across the next season. She told him how to approach the conversation with the current vendors, which she recommended doing directly and without accusation, simply presenting the alternative and giving them the opportunity to match it. You prepared this, he said. Last night, she said. After a 3-day week, he said. The evening was there, she said. And it needed doing. He held her gaze for a moment. Clara, he said. Yes. Thank you. It's the work, she said. It's more than the work, he said. She looked at the account book and said nothing, because what he'd said was true, and she was not going to argue with true things. Mercy's kitchen became something within the first week. Not transformed, she was not dramatic about it, but made into what it should have been. She had spent the first morning with the pantry, and the second morning with Ned, who knew the ranch's food supply in the practical way of a man who ate from it, and she had combined these two bodies of information into a system. Not because she was a more skilled cook than anyone who had been cooking before, she didn't know who had been cooking before and didn't ask, but because she approached it the way she approached everything, which was to know what the materials were and what they wanted to become, and then let them become it. On the 4th evening Ned came back for a second portion of something, and then a third, which Mercy understood was the equivalent of a standing ovation from Ned. Seb said, "This is good, ma'am," and turned the color he turned. Asa ate with the quiet, focused appreciation she had come to understand was his highest form of praise. On the 5th evening she made a dish from home, not because anyone had asked, but because she had the materials, and the evening was good, and she wanted to. It was a dish her grandmother had made, the kind of thing that required 3 hours and specific knowledge, and the confidence of someone who knew what they were making. She put it on the table. Asa tasted it. He looked at her. "What is this?" he said. "My grandmother's recipe," she said. "From Tennessee." "It's..." He stopped. "You don't have to say anything," she said. "I'm going to say something," he said. "This is the best thing I've eaten in 3 years." She looked at her plate. 3 years is a long time to go without eating well, she said. "Yes," he said. "It is." "You won't anymore," she said. It was not a promise, exactly. It was just a fact about the present arrangement. He nodded. They ate. Edith found the garden. Not found in the sense of discovering it. She knew where it was. Found in the sense of understanding what it had been, and what it could be, which required 2 days of looking before she could do anything useful. It had been Frances's garden. She knew this, not because anyone told her, but because of the choices it contained, the placement, the variety, the specific care of someone who had known what they were putting in and why. 3 years of neglect had not destroyed it. Some things were gone, but the bones were right, and the soil was good, and what was dormant rather than dead. She worked it for 3 days before she said anything to Asa. On the 4th day she said, "The garden was your wife's." He was at the fence line nearby. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "I'm going to restore it," she said. "Not change it, restore it. What she put in was right." He looked at the garden. "Is that all right?" she said, because it needed asking. He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "She'd have wanted it used." "I know," Edith said. "I can tell from the planting." He looked at her. "You can tell that," he said. "You can tell things from gardens," she said. "The same way you can tell things from kitchens. The choices people make about what to grow tell you who they were." He held her gaze. What does it tell you? He said. That she was practical and knew her soil, and wasn't interested in things that looked better than they tasted. Edith said. And that she planned ahead. The perennials are in the right places for the right reasons. Someone planted those thinking about 5 years from now. He looked at the garden for a long moment. That was Frances. He said. I thought so. Edith said. She went back to work. Prue walked to Grover's Bend on the 5th day. 7 miles. She left at first light, and Asa heard her going, and came out of the barn. The school board chairman lives in town, she said, by way of explanation. I know. He said. Take the horse. She looked at the horse. I can walk. She said. You can. He said. But you'll be tired, and it'll be dark by the time you're back if you do. Take the horse. She took the horse. She came back in the afternoon with the expression of someone who had been in a conversation that had gone in both directions. They want someone to teach through the summer and see, she said. Starting Monday. That's good, he said. The chairman wanted a reference, she said. I gave him your name. I know. He said. He rode out this morning. She stared at him. While you were on the way, he said. He came to ask about you. I told him you were one of the most capable people I'd observed in a week, and that I expected him to be grateful he was getting her. She looked at him. I've known you a week, she said. I know what I saw in a week, he said. She looked at the horse. Thank you, she said. You did the 7 miles, he said. I wrote some words. The thanks goes the other direction. She took the horse back to the barn. The end of the week came. He did not bring it up. She, Edith, did, on the evening of the 7th day, which was Sunday, at the kitchen table after supper, when all 4 of them were there, and Asa was there, and Ned and Seb had gone to the bunkhouse. The week is done, she said. Yes, he said. You said we each decide separately. Yes. She looked at Clara, at Mercy, at Prue. I'm staying, she said. That's my decision. Clara said. The accounts are in order for the first time in 3 years, and there's more to do. I'm staying. Mercy said. I haven't finished the pantry system. I'm staying. Prue said. I start Monday. I'm staying. He looked at all 4 of them. He did not make a speech about it. He was not a man who made speeches. All right, he said. Then we'll sort out the permanent arrangements. $4 a month was the offer, Clara said. $4 was for people I wasn't sure of yet, he said. 5 for people who have shown me what a week looks like. Clara opened her mouth. Clara, Edith said. Clara closed her mouth. 5, Edith said. 5, he said. Spring became summer on Pell Creek Ranch. The garden came back, slowly, and then with conviction, the way neglected but sound things came back when given attention. Edith had been right about the perennials, which were exactly where Frances had put them, for exactly the reasons Frances had put them there. And by June, the south side of the house had color, and by July, it had produce, and by August, it was what it had been meant to be. Clara found $1,100 in additional revenue over the course of the summer, simply by changing 2 vendors and organizing the cattle sale timing to match market conditions she had mapped over the previous 3 seasons. She did not mention this as an achievement. She mentioned it as a fact, presented at the kitchen table with the ledger open, because it was relevant. Asa looked at the number. He looked at Clara. $1,100, he said. Approximately, she said. There are still 2 months in the season. Clara, he said. Yes. This ranch was not in trouble, he said. But it was. Not what it could be, she said. Correct. And now? He said. Now it's closer to what it could be. She said. We'll get it the rest of the way next year. He looked at her. We. He said. I said what I meant. She said, and closed the ledger. Mercy's kitchen became the thing Ned communicated his appreciation of by eating 4 portions of most suppers and not complaining about anything, which Ned and Prue both agreed was his highest form of expression. She added things to the pantry system that no one had asked for, including a record of what the ranch hands preferred and what they didn't, which she kept because she believed that knowing what people needed was the foundation of everything else and that the kitchen was where you found out. She sent a letter to Tennessee in June. She sent 3 more through the summer. She received one in August, which she read alone in the kitchen, and then folded and put in her coat pocket, and did not speak of at dinner. And after dinner Edith found her on the porch, and sat beside her, and didn't speak either, which was exactly what was needed. Prue taught school through the summer, and into the fall. She had 31 students, ranging from 5 to 14, in a single-room schoolhouse that had been built with good intentions and insufficient lumber, and which she organized the way she organized everything, which was by first understanding what it was, and then making it what it needed to be. She rode the 7 miles in the mornings, and 7 back in the evenings, and arrived at the ranch with the particular brightness of someone who has spent the day doing the thing they were put on earth to do. Asa watched this happen, with the attention he gave everything important, which was quiet and complete. He said, one evening when she came in, "You're a good teacher." She looked at him. "You've never seen me teach," she said. "I've talked to the parents of your students," he said. "When they come by the ranch, 7 of them have said something about it in the last 2 months." "What did they say?" she said. "That their children come home different," he said. "Not more educated, though that too, different, like someone has taken them seriously." She looked at the floor. "I take them seriously," she said. "That's all." "That's not all," he said. She looked at him. "Asa," she said. "Yes." "Why did you really come to Mrs. Farrow's that morning?" She said. "The real reason. You told us the practical reason. What was the real one?" He was quiet for a moment. He looked out the kitchen window at the summer evening on the ranch, at the garden going, and the barn solid against the hillside, and the light going gold over the mountains. "Because Frances would have done it," he said. "If the situation had been reversed, if she'd heard about 4 women stranded on a platform, she'd have been the first to drive 7 miles in." He paused. "And I've been not doing things for 3 years because it was easier than deciding who I wanted to be without her. And then I heard about the 4 of you, and I thought—" He stopped. "What?" she said. That the answer was still the same as it always was. He said, "You do the right thing, not because someone is watching, or because it serves you, because it's right, and you're capable of it, and you're the one who happened to hear about it." Prue held her coffee. "You're a good man, Asa Pell," she said. He looked at the window. "I'm trying to be again," he said. She said nothing. They sat in the summer kitchen until the evening went dark. The summer turned. The fall came in off the mountains with the particular Colorado, Montana authority of high country autumns that had decided they had things to accomplish. The cattle were sold at the price and time Clara had identified. The winter supplies were ordered on the system she'd built. The root cellar was organized in the way Edith had organized it, which was legible and complete. The kitchen garden was put to bed properly, the perennials mulched, the seeds saved, everything done in the way of someone who was thinking about next spring. Prue finished her summer term and was immediately asked to continue through the year, which the school board communicated through the chairman, who rode out to the ranch specifically to say so, which Asa received with the complete lack of surprise of a man who had known it was coming. On an evening in October, after the first real cold had come and gone, and announced that the winter intended to be something, The four of them sat in the kitchen after supper, and Asa sat at the other end of the table, as he did most evenings, with the accounts, or the planning, or the book he was working through now that the evenings provided it. And the fire was going, and the kitchen was warm, and the ranch outside was doing its autumn work. Edith said, "We should talk about the spring." "Yes," Clara said. Asa put down his book. "The spring arrangement." Edith said, "What changes? What stays?" He looked at her. "What's changing?" He said, "Nothing." She said, "I'm asking the question to establish that nothing is changing, because I want it established." He held her gaze. "I want to expand the garden section on the east side." She said, "I'd need the fence moved." "I'll move the fence in April." He said, "The kitchen accounts need to be a separate line." Clara said, "I've been carrying them in the general ledger, but it would be cleaner separate." "Do it." He said, "I want to add 2 dishes to the regular rotation." Mercy said, "The materials cost more, but the nutrition is better, and I think we've all been running on whatever gets us through, rather than what we should be eating." "Yes," he said. "I want bookshelves in the schoolroom." Prue said, "They don't have to be beautiful, they have to hold books. I can build them if someone will show me how." He looked at her. "Ned can show you," he said. "He built the barn's inner structure. He can show you shelves." Prue looked at Ned, who was at the far end of the table and had been eating with his usual focus. He looked up and nodded in the way that meant yes, and went back to eating. Edith looked at Asa. "We're staying," she said. "All 4 of us. That's what this conversation is." He held her gaze. "I know," he said. "I want to make sure you know." She said, "Edith?" He said, "I knew after the first week. I didn't say anything because it was yours to say." She looked at him. "That's right," she said. "It was." "Yes," he said. Winter came to Pell Creek Ranch. It came the way Montana winters came, without asking and with full intention, and it covered the ranch in the particular depth of high country snow that made every day's work a negotiation with the elements and every evening's warmth a thing that had been earned. They were warm. Not because the ranch was luxurious, it wasn't, but because 4 women who knew how to run a house had been running it since April and had prepared for winter the way winter deserved to be prepared for, which was seriously and in advance. The root cellar was full, the pantry was organized and stocked, the wood was stacked in the right quantities and places, the animals were in the barn, and the barn was sound. Ned said, one January morning, when the snow was serious outside, and the kitchen was the warmest room in Montana, "Good winter." "Yes," Mercy said. "Is it usually not?" "Not like this," Ned said. He ate his breakfast. "You're doing," he said. "All of ours," Mercy said. Ned shrugged in the way that meant he was not going to argue, but he had an opinion. Seb said, "Ma'am, this is good," and turned the color he turned, which had become one of the reliable features of the household that everyone privately looked forward to. Asa came in from the barn and washed and sat at the table and looked at what was in front of him and looked around the kitchen, at all 4 of them, at Ned and Seb, at the warmth and the food and the lamp on the table and the books on the shelf. He looked at all of it for a moment, with the expression of a man who has been somewhere dark for a long time and has come into the light and is not performing his gratitude because he is feeling it, and the feeling is too real for performance. "Asa," Edith said. "Yes." "Eat?" she said. "It's getting cold." He ate. The winter letter came in February. It came addressed to all 4 of them, which was unusual, because letters were not usually addressed to 4 people at once, which meant someone had been deliberate about it. It was from Mrs. Farrow, in Grover's Bend. Edith read it at the breakfast table, with the other three listening. Mrs. Farrow had written, "I have heard from Cobb, who hears most things, that you are all still at Pell Creek, and that the situation is what it seemed it might be. I'm glad for it. I wanted to tell you that the town has been talking about you, which you probably expected. But I want you to know the kind of talking, which is not the kind you might have feared. People here have been seeing Prue Dalloway's students on Saturdays, and they have been talking about what those children are becoming. They have been hearing about the Pell Creek Ranch from people who do business with it, and they have been noting that it is different than it was. The kind of talking that is happening about you is the kind that makes a place revise its opinion. I thought." She put the letter down. Prue was looking at the table. "The students," she said. "She said what those children are becoming." Mercy said. Prue said. Edith looked at Asa. "I said the town would have opinions." He said. "You said some people would find it entertaining and some would find it worth doing something about." She said. "That was Mrs. Farrow." He said. "Yes." Edith said. "Both kinds." She folded the letter. She put it on the shelf above the window where important things went. Spring came back to Pell Creek Ranch in the way spring came back to Montana, fighting for every inch of it, the snow resisting, the land insisting, the two of them negotiating the way old arguments got resolved, which was gradually and then all at once. The fence on the east side of the garden was moved in April. The east beds were planted in the second week, in the expanded section, with the seeds Edith had saved through the winter, and the ones she'd ordered from the catalog Clara had found in the account filing. Clara had the accounts closed for the first year on the new system. She showed Asa the full year's picture in March. He looked at it for a long time. "We're doing better than I've done in 6 years," he said. "The structural improvements aren't fully in yet," she said. "Next year will be better still." "You're sure of that?" he said. "I'm sure of it," she said. "I've built the projection." She showed him the projection. He looked at it. "Clara?" he said. "Yes." "This ranch is going to be—" He stopped. "What it was supposed to be," she said. "Before the 3 years." "Yes." "Plus what I've done to it since," she said. "Which is more than that." He looked at her. "Yes," he said. She closed the ledger. On a morning in April, Edith was in the garden in the early light, and Asa came out of the house with his coffee and stood at the garden's edge, which he did sometimes, and they stood in the April morning together, in the particular silence of two people who had said everything that needed saying and were comfortable in the silence that came after. "Asa," she said. "Edith." "The ring," she said. "Francis's ring." He looked at her. She had not brought this up before. She brought it up now because it was April and a year had passed, and some things waited for a year to pass before they were ready to be said. "What about it?" he said. "Is it in the house?" she said. "Yes," he said. "Where?" she said. "The top drawer of the desk," he said. "In a blue box." She looked at the garden. "I'm not asking you to do anything with it," she said. "I'm asking where it is, because I want to know where it is." He was quiet. "Why?" he said. She looked at the spring morning, at the garden that was Francis's bones and her work, at the house where 4 women lived alongside a man who had driven 7 miles in the morning, because it was right. "Because some things should be known," she said. "Where they are, in case they're needed." A long silence. "Edith," he said. "You don't have to say anything," she said. "I want to say something," he said. "Then say it," she said. He was quiet for a moment in the way that was his particular quality, the quiet that held weight. "I drove 7 miles that morning," he said. "Because it was right, that was true." "Yes," And I also drove 7 miles, because when I heard about 4 women on that platform I thought something I didn't say. She turned and looked at him. What? She said. I thought, I am going to go and see who they are. He said. All of them, all 4, and whatever comes from that is whatever it is, but I am not going to sit here on this ranch and do nothing because it is safe. She held his gaze. Francis would have gone. She said. Francis would have gone. He said. And you went instead. She said. Yes. And this is what it is. She said. Yes. He said. This is what it is. She looked at the garden. The ring is in the desk. She said. Top drawer, blue box. Yes. He said. All right. She said. She went back to the planting. He went back inside. That is not the end of the story. Stories like this one do not end in April mornings in gardens, though they often hinge there, on the particular clarity of something said plainly before the day requires other things. What happened after? Clara stayed. She became, over the following years, the person who managed not only the accounts of Pell Creek Ranch, but the accounts of 2 neighboring ranches, who heard about the work she'd done, and asked for the same. She rode the distances. She kept the books. She built something with numbers that had not existed before, a clarity about what working ranches were, and what they could be, and what stood between those 2 things, which turned out to be simply someone paying attention. Mercy stayed. She also, in the summer of the 2nd year, married Seb, who had been quietly in love with her since the first week, and had said nothing about it for a year and 3 months, and then said something about it on a Tuesday morning in the barn, in a voice that was barely audible, and with a face the color it always turned, and Mercy had looked at him for a long moment and said, Yes, you fool, I've been waiting. Which was true. Prue taught in Grover's Bend for 7 years. She built the schoolroom a library of 42 books, she and Ned together, on 4 Saturdays in November. She became the kind of teacher who was talked about, not the comfortable kind of talking, but the serious kind, the kind where a place understood it had been given something that did not come around often and had better not waste it. Edith stayed. She did not marry Asa Pell in the 1st year or the 2nd. In the 3rd year, on an April morning in the garden that was Francis's bones and her hands, he asked her plainly, and she answered him the same way, which was yes. The ring was in the desk, top drawer, blue box. It fit. There are men who step forward, and men who do not, and the difference between them is not always visible from the outside. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply a man hears about a wrong thing and drives 7 miles in the morning because he cannot not. Asa Pell drove 7 miles. He found 4 women on a platform who had been failed by men who made promises they didn't keep, and he made no promises. He offered work and room and the honest dealing he was capable of, and he let what grew from that grow at its own pace without managing it. What grew? A ranch that became what it was supposed to be, and then more than that. A school that changed the children of a town, and through them, the town. A kitchen that fed people the way they deserved to be fed. A garden that had been Francis's bones and became Edith's hands and was, in the end, the best of both of them. And 4 women who had stepped off a train with carpetbags and photographs of men who were not going to show up, and had stood on a platform in a town that was still working out what to do with them, and had made from those materials, from the failure and the unexpected morning and the plainly spoken offer, and the week that became the rest of it, something that none of them had traveled 1,100 miles expecting to find. Which was this? Which was home? Which was, it turned out, what they had been going toward all along, even when the thing they were going toward seemed like something else entirely. The train had brought them to a platform. One man had stepped forward, and from those 2 plain facts, everything else had been built. 1 day at a time. 1 honest word at a time. The way good things are always built.